For more on the president's plans for FEMA, we're joined by former FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. She oversaw the agency under the Biden administration. Deanne, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. We are learning that President Trump is expected to sign an executive order to establish a task force charged with reviewing FEMA. But the idea of needing some reform in the agency is not really new. Managers under both Democratic and Republican administrations have suggested changes for some time. Explain where these issues are and what you think should be done.
Phil, FEMA has obviously been around for a very long time, but I would say that the role that we play in helping people before, during, and after disasters has continued to grow year after year, with an increase in the number of severe weather events that we're responding to, with our efforts to try to build resilience before a disaster happens, and then with the complex recoveries, once they do happen. And so there's always opportunity to continue to improve, and I think having somebody come by and take a look at it is not a bad thing. But I think that it's important to start the conversation with really understanding what FEMA's role is also at the same time.
Project 2025, the Republican administration's plan produced by the Heritage Foundation, calls for a disaster deductible, reducing federal aid to states that fail to protect their communities against disasters. Interestingly, a similar idea was actually proposed by the Obama administration. Do you see any kind of merit in it?
Well, I think that we've had these conversations, as you said, back to the Obama administration, of when we've seen this increase in the number of disasters that we are supporting financially, is there a better way to do that? And I think this is definitely a conversation that needs to happen, but it needs to happen with governors. It needs to happen with the state directors, those that are relying on the support that FEMA provides, on the ability for FEMA to help coordinate the rest of the federal family, to understand where the challenges are. And I think my concern is that if we rush into something like this, those jurisdictions, those states that don't have as much capability as others will then not recover the way they should, and then they just become more vulnerable to future events.
I'm guessing you saw that in North Carolina today, the president was critical, to say the least, of FEMA's response under your watch. Wondering what your response is to that.
I think, again, there's just a general misunderstanding of the role that FEMA plays. During the response to Hurricane Helene, there was quite a bit of misinformation out there about FEMA not being on the ground, about FEMA not delivering commodities, all of which have been proven to be false. Again, I think that the conversation that needs to happen is recognizing the role that FEMA plays, and that's to coordinate the federal family, and that's to reimburse jurisdictions for the costs that they experience and incur as they're rebuilding, and being there right by the side of the governor and their teams as they're going through these disaster responses and recoveries.
And I'm just curious, finally and quickly, the president suggested today that he might even just get rid of FEMA somehow. Do you think that is the right move?
Well, who's going to do the coordination? Like, these federal agencies don't show up on their own. These federal agencies, like the Army Corps of Engineers, they show up because somebody is sitting next to the governor and says, I have a need. And then FEMA's able to mission assign them and bring them in. That's not going to happen organically. And so if FEMA's not going to be there to coordinate it, who is going to do that? And so I think those are the types of conversations that need to happen.
Understood. Former FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil.